Hello everybody, welcome back to Kaizoku Dead channel. Today's video is actually a video that's really important to me because I wanted to share with you my Enel list that made top 32 in the Top Cut regional that took place over this weekend on March 30th, 2024. This is special to me because, you know, it's my first top 32 standing as a player. Usually, whenever I go into regionals, I do my score ends up with like X3, and this is the first regional where I broke that personal record and I made it to X2, and and I was able to make it to top 32. And I wanted to share this list with you because one, I did it with a leader that's not meta. He's kind of off meta right now, in the beginning of OP06, and and this leader has been a leader that I've been constantly playing with since last season. So it's a leader that I feel very comfortable with, and it's a list. And this list, honestly, is a list that I made personally. I wasn't, going online and looking up NL list and see, you know, what their win percentages were or anything. This was just completely homebrew based on, my own personal experiences at locals and my own kind of play style. And so I kind of wanted to share this list with you. So yeah, my name is Oscar Manzano. That's like my real name. My YouTube name is Kaizoku Dad on Bandai, and at locals, my nickname is Sedition. So here are like the standings from the event. I placed in 23rd, 8-2, so 8 wins, 2 losses. Um, and these are the rest of the top 32 winners. So some, I guess, well-known TCG players is Michael like Cross AI. So if you go to his on his Twitter, you'll see that he made a post stating that he was third place. So it was that same tournament that I participated in, and I'm right here on top 23. So this is the list, and some of the people that I played with, like for example, with Milk, he placed top 9. He was actually my 10th round opponent, and he was playing Sakazuki. He beat me, and you know I remember him giving me a pep talk at the end, which was fine. It was really cool of him giving me that pep talk. He thought I would feel bad, but personally, I wasn't feeling bad. I was really happy with my result because, like, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it was my first time going or making it to top 32. So he made it to top 16, which is great. He just fell a little shy from top 8, but congratulations to him and to all of my other opponents. I think I also played a guy named Turtles, so I was one of his defeats here, but I think his tiebreakers ultimately were better than mine, so he made it to top 16. But yeah, again, I'm really happy with my result. And so without further ado, here is the deck list that I piloted. So this is the deck that I took to regionals. You'll notice that it has some of the new cards, like the Wano cards. So like Inurashi, Kikunojo, Nekomushi, and we still have some of the old or OP05 core list that Enel decks had. So we have like the Shura, the Satori, Gedatsu, Enel, Amaru, Konis, which was the 2K. So we still have that kind of core mixed with like the new mixed with some of the new cards. So that includes also the new Zero event card, which is really good. And we have the Yamato, of course. We have the Beige, which is one of the really best 2K counters for yellow because of its trigger. And we have Cracker and Katakuri. So, and Sanji as well. So this deck is really kind of a very aggressive has a very aggressive play style with the amount of like trigger cards that have like 5k attack that can swing into the leader, and also the Russian in Gedatsu. So like the rest of this video, I'm really going to talk about kind of which cards were MVP and why. and against which matchups that were just really good. And also talk about maybe some changes that I would make to this list if I can do it all over again. So let's go ahead and get into that. So the absolute MVP in this deck is, I would have to say, it's Cracker. And right now, if you look at the list, I think he is at 3. And after today's, or yesterday's result, I would definitely pump him up to 4. But this guy, single-handedly, I think, whenever he popped out from life, I don't think there was a match that I lost. Or let me rephrase that. Whenever he came out from life, there was no match. Sorry, I'm struggling to word this, but there was no match where whenever I triggered him, I lost. Even if he didn't attack. That's the thing. That's just how strong his presence was whenever I triggered him. So, obviously, when your opponent kind of attacks into you, he already has kind of a plan going into his turn and before doing his attack. And whenever a Cracker just comes out from life, they have to pivot if they can, right? They have to pivot their whole turn to kind of just, answer Cracker or prepare for Cracker's attack. And that's really strong. There was, I think, one match where, against Katakuri, actually, where I triggered Cracker and, because of Cracker's attack, his life went from 5 to 3, and that might not seem much. The trigger happened at the start of the game, but that might not seem much. But because we are running 1-0 cards, having your opponent or down to 3 life kind of activates all of those trigger effects that you can just play for free for 1-0 cards, and that's really big. So Cracker is that card that can either close out the game for you, or against leaders with 5 life, Cracker can just activate your 1-0 cards and by putting them from 5 to 3. That's how strong Cracker is. And another game where I think it was against a Sakazuki, where I triggered Cracker, and on that turn, I think I had a Yamato, and my opponent told me this after the match, after I won. He told me that on that turn where Cracker came out, he was prepared to kind of get rid of my Yamato, but because the Cracker came out, he had to make a choice. He was down to 3 or 4 cards in hand. There was only 1 blocker, and I think he had 2 cards in life. I obviously was down to 1 life, and he was planning to clear the Yamato and just have control of the board, but because of that Cracker, he had to pivot. He had to use his last Ice Age, or the only Ice Age that he had in his hand, to take out the Cracker, the unexpected Cracker, and leave the Yamato up. And because of that, my opponent struggled to kind of clear that Yamato. I played another Yamato. I think I played another Yamato next turn, so I was back to 2, but now there was 2 Yamatos. And with the very little cards left in his hand, and only 2 cards and only 1 blocker, two cards in life and 1 blocker, I was able to close out that match, even though Cracker did not attack. But the presence of Cracker was just really strong. It helped Yamato stay alive and helped me kind of continue to heal and pressure at the same time. So, Cracker MVP, I'm definitely going to bump him up to 4. The other MVP is Gedatsu. Gedatsu is... So, here's the thing with yellow, right? Because everyone's really running Kiku no Jo and Nekomushi, right? These 2, Kiku no Jo, Nekomushi. They're running Kiku no Jo obviously because she has 2 very strong effects. Her trigger, where you can play her for free when your opponent's at 3 life or less, and her KO, where you gain a life if your opponent has 3 or less life. And Nekomushi, where again, same trigger effect, And his ability, where you can attach 2 Dawn and you can attack an active card, is pretty good. But the whole premise for both of these triggers is that your opponent be at 3. Now, if you're in a yellow versus yellow matchup, Enel struggles against Katakuri just for one thing, and that's because of their life, where they start at 5 and you start at 4. So Katakuri really only needs to hit you once to get you from 4 to 3, and then their Kikunojos and their Nekos are going to be free. You need to hit them twice for that same effect, or for that same kind of chance to just play your Wano cards. And that makes the yellow versus yellow matchup hard against Enel. But here's the great part. It's Gedatsu. Gedatsu, you get so much benefit from Gedatsu. And this is not just against yellow, against Katakuri. This is against any leader that has 5 life. They will kind of make it very hard for you as a yellow player to get them down to 3 life. But Gedatsu takes advantage of that. There were so many matches against Moria. I played so many Morias, and none of them made it easy for me to get them down to 3. But I punished them with Gedatsu. All of their Luchis, even the Kuzan, right? I put whenever they were at 4 for like 3 or 4 turns, I punished them with Gedatsu. And that swung a lot of momentum in my favor. And there was even matches where I was already at 9. We were at late game 9 or 10 Dawn, and they were still at 4 life. And I just punished them with no, they were not at 4 life. Sorry, I would punish them with Gedatsu. Once they saw that I was punishing them with Gedatsu, they finally gave up, and they're like, okay, I'm going to be down at 3 life now. But at that point, it's the Yamato turns, where I'm at 1. I'm taking life, regardless, even if they're not at 3 life or less. I'm still taking life because that's no. But now that they were taking life and they're down to 3 life, and I'm at 1, it still puts them in range for Yamato to KO their 4 cost characters. That's the punishment that Gedatsu and Yamato have against 5 life leaders with 5 life, where they don't make it easy for you to get them down to 3 life or less. So that's why kind of Gedatsu's just MVP in those matchups. Shura's just great because you have so many searches, so many important searches. Like you can search out Gedatsu, which is important. You search out Enel, which is also a very important card to see in the matchups, because you want to pressure with Enel. You need an Amaru. You can search it with Shura. You need a 2K. You can search it with Shura. You have 4 copies of Satori's, 2 of Koni's, so you have that option. You even have the 0 cost event. That's a Sky Island, and that can turn a Kikunojo into a 3K counter. So if you're looking for counters, Shura can search up these 3 cards. If you're looking to put more pressure, Shura can look up Enel, Amaru, close out the game with Amaru. So that actually happened once where I think it was against Fortress Yamato, where I had a board full of Yamatos and maybe one Enel, 7 cost Enel, and he already had he had a wall of blockers, and he had his 8 cost kid. So I just put I think I played Shura. I looked up Amaru, rested one of his blockers, and pumped up my leader, and then just I think put a lot of pressure. He had to use all of his counter and all of his the rest of he had 3 blockers, but he had to use two more blockers because of that. So all of his blockers were gone, and I was able to finish the game. So that's why Shura is MVP. Whether you see him, it's best if you see him early. That way you can set up your Gedatsus or whatever or just fix your hand in whatever way you need, or search out Enel. But either way, late or early game, Shura was the MVP. So these are the Wano cards that I included in the deck. Everyone's familiar with the Neko and Kiku no Jo. Not a lot of people are running the dog though, and I am. Honestly, the main reason why I'm running this card is because I like, so as an L, like your life is your resource in many ways. It's your resource for like summoning characters, which is why we have a lot of characters that have trigger and you can play them, and they're characters that you can attack with. So your life is a way to play characters. Your life is also a way for you to draw, and so that's the main reason. That's how you should look at your life, or at least that's how I look at my life as an NL player. So when I'm playing a character from my life, um, what I like or what I don't like is having to discard a card to play that character. So that's why cards like Smoothie, you don't. I don't have cards like Smoothie in here. Um, I do have the Cracker and the Sanji. I think I have two Sanjis, three Crackers. These break away from the norm simply because one, Sanji's a blocker, and he's flexible that way, and Cracker is just Cracker. He's cracked. He's just too good where I don't mind discarding him because I know it puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. But other cards like Smoothie, Parasparrow, whatever, where you have to discard a card to summon them, it just feels really bad, and you lose kind of card advantage. At least with the Wano cards, like you don't have to discard them. And here's the thing, like I don't know if people who have played Enel before and they're running the Kiku no Jo and the Nekos, and they're like, I know I've seen some yellow players. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've seen some yellow players where if they're not at 3 life, if their opponent is not at 3 life, they don't want to take damage. They'd rather use their cards to counter and um and attack their opponent. So they're essentially kind of like reducing the amount of cards from hand before taking life, just to ensure that like these triggers hit, And for me, that's not necessarily the case. I even if like these cards are in life and my opponent is still not at 3 life or less, I'm not gonna reduce my hand um, just for these effects, because like in the end, if even if I'm playing them, I don't mind playing these like hard casting, like playing for Dawn just to play them. Um, I kind of have to like the way I'm using up my turns is that I want to put a body, I want to attack with my leader, put pressure, take as much life as I can from them, so that when I get to my big guys, which are Enel and Yamato, like I can push with them. I want them to be like maybe at 2 life, maybe 3 life, once I get to Yamato or Enel, right? So even if I'm not triggering these Wano cards are good because they give me a counter in hand. Is essentially what I'm trying to say. And so people, when you're down to 1 life as an L and they see that you still have like 8, 9, 10 cards in hand, they're scared. Like they're not gonna try and like force you to push game. You kind of want them to though, honestly, because like what I really like about Enel is that you can be at 1 life, and if your opponent kind of falls for it, where like they think they can finish you, and they go all out, and you just out counter them, you counter out of their attacks, they're left like really wide open, and that and you can just take advantage of that as an L. But ultimately, what I'm trying to say is that like these Wano cards are good because you can summon them for free. But even if you can't summon them because your opponent is not at 3 life, they serve as counter. And in the late game where you're just playing Yamato and Enel over like back to back, like these counters are just gonna save you a whole bunch. So I guess if you're a yellow player and you're one of those players where early on you're countering early, reducing your hand because you want to ensure that your opponent is at 3 life, so that if these cards are in your life, you can trigger them. Like I think not the most optimal way to play it. But that's just kind of my mindset going into these Wano cards and taking life as an L. Like, I'm still gonna take life regardless. I really want to get down to one life because I want to, have Yamato and be able to heal and get that value. And these cards ultimately just become counters towards the end, anyways. So, and in if you do manage to pull these guys out, it's just an extra body where they have to kind of use counters to get out of their attacks. So that's kind of like their whole purpose. Like they're just beaters. If you're once you attack with them once, most of the time you'll just let them go once they attack into them, because again, I don't want to reduce my hand defending a Neko when I have another Neko in hand and I could just play him active next turn. So that's just kind of like my stance with Wano. I hope that makes sense. Now, for the last part of this video, like, I want to talk about some of the changes that I would make. And obviously the biggest change that I would make is the Katakuri, the 8 cost Katakuri. So my whole reasoning of including the 8 cost Katakuri was because of my matchup against the Fortress Yamato, where once they have Kid out and a bunch of blockers and like a full hand, it is so hard to win from that position. Extremely hard. So the Katakuri, the 2 copies that I included were specifically for that matchup, because like I would rather the way the Yamato Fortress matchup goes is that like every time I attack, they take life, so they're building up their life, or their hand. I'm sorry, they're not really countering out of much unless they have to. Like if there's like a banish or something involved like that, or a cracker where it kind of fast tracks the game. Unless something like that happens, they usually don't counter out. They want to build up their hand, and so to the point where at their 8th Dawn turn or 9th Dawn turn, depends if they go first or second, they play him, and then they can counter almost out of everything. Then they have their blockers, so it makes it very difficult. With Katakuri, at least I can, if it reaches to that point, like at least I can Katakuri the 8 cost kid and then attack with whatever I have on board and make them use counter or their blockers, because they're down to 1, or they'll be at 1 life. They'll take it because they'll take the first attack because they want the kid, and then they have to counter out of the rest because they're going to be at 0 life. That's usually how the Yamato Fortress goes, and that's the whole reason why I included the Katakuri. And I think it's still, for those specific matchups, it's warranted. In this regional, I think I played against 2 Fortress Yamatos. The one of them didn't have the kid when they needed it, so they ended up using like most of their counters, and by the time they did have kid, they didn't have a lot of cards in hand, and it was just easy to get through. The second one of the other Yamatos, Fortress Yamatos that I played against, I just had I had like 3 Yamato, like 3 9 cost Yamatos and a 7 cost Enel. And so they were doing the majority of the damage to our attacks going in. At that point, because I had such big bodies on board, it was just kind of a slow. I was just taking it slow because I knew they could counter from it. So I was just swinging for 9, 9, 8, 8, 8, just the bare minimum, just to reduce the cards in their hand, before going all in. So I think now that I know that's like an option, then this kind of frees up some space. Removing the 2 copies of Katakuri, it would free up some space to include other things. And some other things that I would personally include, everyone's favorite or not favorite card, depending on who's on the receiving end, right? Reject. I think I play Reject in locals, and to be honest, it's a good card, but I get maybe it's just my playstyle where most of the times I just trigger if there's a reject in life, I just trigger it and draw a card. There's been very few times where I actually play this card simply because like I have a lot of bodies on board and I can just like I don't know. I guess for me it's just easy or not easy. How should I say this? Like reject is just a card where I don't really need it to win, but it is a good card. I'm not saying it's a bad card. Like you can KO a 5 cost or less. I think the times that I have used reject has been for its first effect to KO a 5 cost or less, like a Kuzan, or Sabo or something like that. I don't think I've really used its second effect, maybe once or twice, very few times. But I think it's a flexible enough card where you can include it over Katakuri and it's perfectly fine. My personal favorite card to include though is the 4 cost rush Katakuri. Like I ran 2 copies of him in OPO5, and this guy put in so much work, um, because it opened up lines of like different kinds of plays where it was better to summon a Katakuri and put in swing than to play like the rush Enel, you know? And because you're always low on life, the chances are like you'll be able to get that rush effect. But even if you don't have a rush effect, like let's say like I'm just playing him on a curve on my 4 Dawn turn, um, and even though I don't have less life, like I would still play him because I get to look at the top card of my life and decide whether I want it there or not, or at the bottom. So sometimes I've found the beige and put it at the bottom. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes just a regular normal card with no counter. But the body, the 6K attack is so good. Right? It makes it so hard for your opponent to. They have to commit a little bit more resources to either attack into him, or to remove him, and that just means that they're using up their removal, in cards like this instead of cards like your Yamato or your Russian out. So I'm a big fan of this category. I think 1 copy is good. Two is good too. Between 2 to 1, like I said, OPO5 I ran 2 copies of him, and boy, he won me a lot of games. So he's my favorite. But yeah, he's some of the change. I would definitely take out this category and maybe swap it in for one of these 2 cards, or maybe another card with like a trigger. So it could be like a let's see, maybe a 4th dog guy, or a 4th cracker for sure, I guess. You know, um, but yeah, that's some of the changes. If you don't want to take him out, because look, Katakuri is good. Like the 8 cost Katakuri is good against Gecko, against 8 cost Kid, which is a lot of cards that you see in today's meta. Um, so I'm not saying that he is bad, but he can be slow sometimes. Or you can just like in one there. I think that in the regional I only played him once or twice, maybe once. And that one time I did play him was to put Shura back on top, and that was the classic kind of category turn in OPO5 where I just use him, put Shura or Shirahoshi on my life, but there's no Shirahoshi here. Um, you know, just you heal and you kind of set up your trigger. That's always good. So, but yeah, personally, I think I would rather skip all of that and just like have a body to be more aggressive with, because this deck is very aggressive. Many times, I'd be able to win games even though like I had like my opponents had like a board full of like characters ready to attack me. I would just go to life, because I have the rush, I have the counters, I have the Enel ability, I have like this 0 cost event where I can counter out of 7K attacks, like putting a lot of pressure to your opponent and finishing off the game with these bodies is just kind of what this deck does, especially with the Maru. So But yeah, that's the deck list. This is the deck list that I took to regionals. Again, 23rd place. It was a lot better than than I expected. I almost didn't like participate because I thought I had missed the deadline to submit the deck list. So yeah, it was a close call, but in the end, I was able to participate. So I hope you liked today's video, and let me know what you guys think about Enel. I like Enel. I've been playing Enel in my locals for like, yeah, it's only been a week of OPO6, right? 1 week, 1 week and a half, but um, there was two locals that I went to, and I got first place in one and third place in the other, and still got winner cards. So Enel is still doing work for me. Um, and this is kind of the deck list that I am running, except for Katakuri. The two in the my locals category, my local sorry deck list is all of this except for Katakuri. This Katakuri is two rejects, but everything else is still the same. But yeah, anyways, hope that is informative for you. And until the next one, thank you for watching.